Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. Thanks for joining me today. In this video, we're going to discuss the key developments that are happening right now internationally, things we need to be aware of and be able to prepare providentially for them. Let's get started. So friends, thanks for joining me on the Patriot Nurse channel. We discuss medical preparedness, current events with a heavy lens of history, looking at all of it. So friends, if you're paying attention to the news right now, there's some things that are happening. I wanted to go over the key points that I'm looking at as the world is unfolding and really what they harken back to in the lessons from the past that we can apply to be more prepared for the present. So the first is obviously that we have Joe Biden, a feckless, incapable leader, now at the head of the nuclear codes in the United States, but also representing us internationally and fumbling and messing up every step of the way. This week, President Biden, appearing at a NATO summit, messed up the names of President Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, with the leader of Russia, the other belligerent, for Vladimir Putin. This is not a small thing, and this is not something that happens just because you're sleep deprived or having a bad day. Joe Biden, as we saw not only in the debate, but for anybody who has been paying attention to this man's rapid decline in his faculties, we now know that there's beyond a shadow of a doubt no reason why this man should be in power. If there was ever a reason for the 25th Amendment to be invoked, this is it. We have someone who is not capable because of his limitations of his health. He is not capable of leading. So there's no wonder, though, that the Democrats are totally not for supporting the proper application of the 25th Amendment. They would rather go full tilt retard crazy with trying to apply it to President Trump, who is just fine, by the way. When you look at his mental faculties, you can argue whether or not he's polite and like everything, all the accolades that we would wish for people to be. But the bottom line is that the 25th Amendment definitely applies to President Biden and not to President Trump in this case. But the bigger issue is as follows. President Biden is showing at a time of unparalleled change in the world power structure, weakness from the United States projecting on the international stage. We have the de facto hegemony. We have the power since World War II, the victories of the Allies over the Axis. We have been the big kid on the block. And now when you have weakness projected internationally, what that does is set up essentially a free-for-all for power grab for the up-and-coming nations and who really wants to shift the balance of power. And that leads me into my next point. China is expanding its overall expenditures from their budget and rapidly expanding the spending in their military capability. Now, one of the ways that they've done this is to focus on its application in developing their Navy. Now, their Navy really can't hold a candle to ours, but they're putting the money in ahead of time. And thanks to the Clintons and some of the espionage that they've done here in the United States, they are increasingly coming into ownership of technologies that can compete with us on the seas. So they're spending more and more on building up their military, on building up their capability, certainly with their naval assets. And there's something that we should really pay attention to as far as it applies. If you look at the lead up to World War I, Germany's decision to get into a naval race with Britain at that time and their refusal to back down from it was a key component in the overall kicking off of World War I, because it's important to understand this. Britain, which was the hegemonic power at the time, Britain is an island, obviously. Great Britain and the United Kingdom, the power of that empire was based on their navy. Because they are an island. Islands are not inherently self-sufficient for the most part, and Britain was no exception to this. They were a net importer of goods, but also their empire required that their fleet be the watch safe, the keeper of the security of the seas for all the transacting of the East India Company and essentially the long arm of British mercantilism. So when Germany had these aspirations, their place in the sun, had these aspirations of we're going to build up our Navy so we can expand our power and be able to have sway on the seas, it led to an arms race because Britain was not about to cede dominance over the seas. And so then one thing led to another, and then you get into brinksmanship, and then ultimately it kicked off. We are in a very similar place right now, I would submit to you, with China, because the Chinese recognize that their own economy is cooling, and this is a really important thing to understand. When economies cease to grow, they stagnate, and then they contract. Contracting economies, called recessions, lead to a lot of domestic instability when people's pockets get hit. And the Chinese are no exception to this. Now, granted, they're a centrally planned economy because the Communist Chinese Party does their thing the way that they do it. But there's a key thing to understand here. China's economy overall, middle class, is contracting. They have kind of gotten to this point where they attracted all of this intellectual capital they've stolen or attracted legally, all of this intellectual capital and all of this property and how to manufacture things, but they only have so many outlets domestically for their goods. And invariably, this is one of the reasons why nations go to war in order to salvage their economies and to also bring domestic cohesiveness. China is in a very similar place right now that Germany was in the lead up to World War I. And so I think for that reason, it behooves us to really pay attention to what's happening with them. So they've obviously been increasing the overall percentage of their budget with what they're spending on their military. But there's another facet here. China and Russia have been increasing the coziness of their relations. They've been buddying up to each other. Now, there's obvious reasons. They share a border, but in fairness, they have more aligned politically than they do really with the West. China's great trading partners are with the West. Their outlets are with the West. But COVID changed a lot of things. And this is the next point I want to draw into focus here. COVID changed the way that business made buddies because everything effectively went on pause. A lot of the shipping was slowed down because of shutdowns, not only in China, but also in the United States. Yeah, the docks were shut down. Things were slow. Things were rotting on the docks. When you don't have good economic ties, you can't have good relational ties. And effectively, we have in the United States been able to keep a very odd sort of amalgamation, a glue with China because of our business ties with them. But as China is positioning itself more and more to take a more powerful position in the Pacific, and also what they're doing with Taiwan, they're strengthening their ties with Russia. And because we have loons at the head of our government who can't figure out who it is that's actually leading the countries of Ukraine and Russia, that puts up a bad front. But moreover, because of the economic steps that we have taken against Russia in the United States, we've alienated them more and more and more. And so who is the next logical power for them to at least have some type of relations with? Not us, with China. So you're going to see more and more, and this is one of the things that I'm looking at, this relationship with China and Russia continue to solidify as the West pushes Russia more and more away. They're going to get stronger and stronger with China. Now, why does this play into things, and why am I watching this? Because as we've established, China is increasing their military budget. They're increasing their presence of their ships, not only in their immediate reach in the Pacific, but also as regards Taiwan. They're doing more and more drills. They have far more in common with a mindset with Russia than certainly they do with the West. But also they stand, and Russia stands more to gain by their continued cooperation with each other. Russia manufactures a lot of armaments. They have a lot of capability to really spin China up and get them to production capacity faster than they could certainly by themselves. This will present, and I'm taking this point, I hope you'll really pay attention to this part. This will present a major challenge for us in the United States and indeed in the West, because as we are contracting not only in our economies, but also in our morals, China and Russia are doubling down on their version of traditional values. And some people might say, obviously, that this includes anti-freedom crackdowns against people, political dissidents, and also people who certainly are not family-friendly from their perspective. But they are solidifying and strengthening their base at home while we are just continuing to commit the same mistakes that every failed empire has. The Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, everything along the list that was a harbinger of doom, we are doing, whereas they are strengthening. So where is this going to lead us to? Inexorably, I believe it's World War III. And in potential, I think that we're going to be facing this likely right about the times of the election. I find it very interesting that the Democrat Party, in the midst of trying to get behind their man, is also realizing that they have no effective person to sub in for Joe Biden. They know that they're weak. And more than their fear of losing the United States as an integral power, they fear losing their own power. So any patriotism that the Democrat Party would try and hold is really not patriotism. It's not an allegiance to our country. It's certainly not an allegiance to the Constitution. They don't want to lose power. And they realize right now that the biggest threat to their losing their power is Joe Biden, not just from domestic election standpoint, but also from their power internationally. If the United States ceases to have its position as the de facto power from a hegemonic status, that they really don't have a dog that's going to hunt from a domestic power standpoint. Furthermore, and to the last point that I want to make here, our dollar is hemorrhaging not only its purchasing power, but as a result of that, it's hemorrhaging its legitimacy on the global stage. And this really brings everything together. And I think one of the reasons why we should pay attention to not only the election, but also the financial situation moving forward. President Trump is going to be speaking at the Bitcoin conference, I think in Nashville, Tennessee. I believe he is scheduled to be there. President Trump recognizes that the dollar in hemorrhaging its purchasing power is also hemorrhaging its legitimacy internationally. But he, as a businessman, understands a key point. Whoever controls the global reserve currency has power to squash things that they don't like. There is no way to keep some type of global stability if the dollar is losing its value. And as cryptocurrencies are rising, and they're rising for many reasons, not the least of which is that the Federal Reserve has destroyed our currency. Because our currency is being devalued, because our currency is being destroyed, our power internationally and our ability to deal with upstart regimes, human rights abusers, all of this, our power to deal with this is waning. You don't get to have a feckless president at the head of the executive branch and have a dollar that is useless and still have power. Yeah, you may have a military, but look at who the military is recruiting nowadays. President Trump has done his homework on this, and he recognizes that the military is in shambles. And it's in shambles because it decided to go woke. When you're more concerned about which dress uniform your transgender recruits are going to wear, as opposed to their combat effectiveness, you can't expect to retain quality people in leadership. So we have the trifecta here of doom. We have a military that can't recruit and keep solid people. We have a dollar that is not solvent. And we have the head of the executive branch, the president, who is not capable of wiping his rear end after toileting, much less holding the nuclear codes securely. So President Trump realizes this, and I think more than anything else, he realizes that the dollar is on its way out. Now, the Federal Reserve is effectively beyond the reach of congressional amendment since really the time that we ceded our power away in the United States. I find it interesting that he's speaking at the Bitcoin conference. I think that he is wise and he knows the way that the wind blows from a business standpoint and from a financial standpoint. He knows that that's coming. So I'm paying attention to what the dollar is doing and how cryptocurrencies are moving. And I think ultimately that diversification outside of the dollar is going to be wise for people. And how you choose to do this is up to you. I'm not giving financial advice. I'm looking at this through the lens of history. And I know, as many people who follow this channel as you know, that history shows over and over again that fiat currencies always go to zero. Every single freaking one of them. The United States is not immune from this law. Fiat currencies, once they're inflated into nothing, they don't somehow get an edit undo on this. They collapse. So the question is, what is going to be the next currency, and how are people who are wise going to look at this and hedge their bets against this? Many people would say, like we talk about on this channel, the beans, bullets, and band-aids is part of it. Some people would add the Bible and Bitcoin as part of it. So now we have like 3 Bs to 4 and 5. But the point is that President Trump knows that our dollar is not going to be worth a lot, certainly if we keep barreling headlong into the oblivion that our predecessors seem to be willing to commit us to. So those are the things that I'm looking at, and those are the things that I am really trying to tailor my preparedness based on. And I'm hoping that you're paying attention in the news. What do you think? Leave me a comment below. Do you think that these things that are forming in front of us are just going to go away? Or like, how do you see this comparing to history's lessons? Let me know in the comments below. Friends, on this channel, the Patriot Nurse channel, we're focused on being prepared for an unknown future using the wisdom and the wise principles of the past. So the beans, bullets, and band-aids, like we've talked about beans, you've got to be able to take care of your family's food needs. Everybody's got to eat and everybody's got to drink. So having food and water, that's a huge part of our preparedness. Also the bullet standpoint, being able to defend yourself, because I can guarantee you that uncertain times don't yield for peace, both internationally and domestically. Nature abhors a vacuum, and it's always going to try and seek the strongest form of power to control it whenever there's craziness going on. Being able to defend yourself is key. And also the band-aids portion. Everybody gets sick. If there are 3 constants throughout history, we know that they are war, famine, and disease. You've got to be able to take care of your family's medical needs at home without respect to supply shortages, political reprisals, or anything going on in the medical industrial complex. You've got to be able to take care of your family, and that's where I come in. I've got 2 courses online for you to train with me. I've got a 4-hour and a 7-hour course. The Foundations and Medical Prep course gets you squared away and helps you equip your family for being able to ride out difficult times without having to go to a hospital, and really being more armed with knowledge and be able to ask intelligent questions if you do need to seek healthcare services. Also, I have the Herbal Preparedness course. It allows you to utilize what God has given us in nature to help support your family's health at home without having to go to a pharmacy and without having to go to search for prescriptions. So friends, I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did get value out of this video, share this with one person who you know would be blessed by it and you could learn something from it as well. Stay strong, stay prepared, guys, but also we know at the end of things, we know that the wisdom of the Lord endures forever. Nations may come and go, but the Lord God Almighty, the creator of heaven and earth, he's put us here for a time and a place such as this to be a blessing for other people. So we know where we operate in. We operate in faith. We walk by faith, not by sight, and perfect love casts out fear. So that's where we operate in. Faith, not fear. I hope the video was helpful for y'all. Have a blessed weekend. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see y'all later. Bye.